Thank you for joining us. This recording was captured live at the 2026 NRB conference. While there may be a few moments where the audio isn't perfect, we're excited to share these great insights and discussions with you.
Okay, hello everybody. We're here again at NRB 2026, and I'm here with a familiar face, or two familiar faces now. Bill Federer and his son Michael are here with us on our set here in our booth at the conference. It's always good to have Bill Federer with us, and Michael, you too. Thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Well, Richard, you're a blessing. Great to be with you.
So, man, there is so much happening in the news and everywhere else. Where do we begin? Do you have any new books, Bill? I'm always fascinated by your stuff. It's amazing how in-depth you go and the nuggets of history that you pull out that we just never heard of. All right, so here's one.
We did a book called Courageous Christianity, and I'm going to let my son tell you about it.
Yeah. Well, Richard, it is always an honor and a pleasure to be with you here. So thank you for having us on Truth and Liberty. And, thank you for that. Our newest book is Courageous Christianity. There's a lot of ways to describe this book, but my favorite way to start is that it tells the story of a character who acts in the Lord's timing, and you see this domino effect, this multiplication of his efforts. So the book does begin with Charles Finney, and he's a lawyer, and he wants to have an experience with the Lord, so he prays all night. Next thing you know, it's morning. He has an experience with the Lord. He describes it as liquid love. And a deacon comes in, and he wants to check on his case. He's suing another deacon. Charles Finney responds without hesitation, "I have to drop your case. I have a retainer from the Lord." He goes on to become a preacher, but he preaches like a lawyer. He'll build a case, and then he'll ask you to make a decision. He's largely responsible for the altar call, but that's just the beginning of the story. These sermons are written down. They make their way over to London, England. The population is booming in London, England at this time, and there's not a lot of wholesome activity. So George Williams at 23 decides he's going to start the Young Men's Christian Association, or the YMCA. Within 9 years, it's an international organization, and it really does set the gold standard for years. Now, this book talks about kind of the golden age of the YMCA, but it's just chock full of fun stories that keep you moving in the right direction. You'll find little Easter eggs in here, such as the invention of basketball, volleyball, rugby, and more.
So YMCA, today when we think of YMCA, we think of, well, basketball courts and somewhere to have a basketball league or a football league maybe, or something like that, but very few people realize that it was originally an evangelical organization. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times you'll just see a Y, and you don't see it marketed the same way today, but it was before the sports, before the basketball, before even the calisthenics. It was a place for men to congregate and essentially study Scripture. Mm-hmm. Now they wanted to make it well-rounded, so they thought, we want to take care of not just the mind and the spirit, but the body. So they started jumping jacks, running, and then around 1890, they approached James Naismith and say, can you make something a little more fun than jumping jacks and running? And he comes up with basketball. Now it begins the way everyone thinks it does. 2 peach baskets tacked on the wall. Eventually the bottom falls out of the peach basket, but with men being competitive, you realize quickly that you're going to have to put some rules down. The 13 rules of basketball are invented, and in James Naismith, in his lifetime, he sees this spread across the nation, even internationally. Hardly tries to capitalize on it. He does a little deal with Spalding, but he's just blessed to see that this sport that, yes, was a tool for ministry, growing so rapidly. So one of my ambitions for this book is that next time the guys are watching the NBA Finals, one of them slaps the other and says, "Did you know that was invented as a tool for ministry?" But quite a lot of stories in here, a lot of characters.
Yeah, so Michael, you're co-author of it, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Well, Richard, I've been behind the scenes for a long time, and had the blessing of being around individuals like yourself, like my father, Andrew, etc. And you have all been very patient with me. And yes, you'll hear a lot more from me soon. My father and I are writing together. I am working on a solo title, but yeah.
Tell about the turning point, the videos.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and of course, we do a weekly lesson with Turning Point Education. It's called How We Got Here, and it describes just that. We pick an event, something that's usually in the news cycle or has been recently, and we give you the full history of it. We joke that you'll become an expert on these topics in about 7 or 8 minutes, and if you pause these, you'll realize that there's historically accurate photos and documents. If he is quoting something, you'll see the quote from the document. You can pause it, turn it into a full 45-minute lesson for your classroom. Just a phenomenal resource through Turning Point Education.
Yeah, exciting. Well, Bill, so you're the founder of American Minute. For anybody who's watching who hasn't heard of that, what is the American Minute?
Right, so it started as a 60-second radio spot. The Bot Radio Network aired it, and then it was picked up by others. And it's something that happened in American history with acknowledgement of faith.
Okay.
So it'll talk about, a battle, and it'll have Continental Congress declaring a day of fasting. And so we began to email out the transcript, and then it turned into an email list that people can sign up for. And now we've got thousands of people that read it every time we send it out.
Yeah.
And then we do videos, and now we even use the AI and turn it into audio.
Okay.
And so you can click on it and listen to it. It's our voices, but we put the text in there. You don't realize that when you're actually reading through something and you mess up, and then you got to go back and re-record it and edit it. It could take like hours.
Yes.
All right, but the AI can do it quick. But it's your voice, and I wrote it, right? So we wrote it, so it's
So it's real. Well, so American Minute, just so you guys don't know, you need to go there, AmericanMinute.com, sign up for the email, because it comes in your inbox every day, and it'll give you a glimpse into history, significant events, and so forth that you just won't get anywhere else. It's amazing, and it's a great way. I think it's a great homeschooling tool. I think it's a great way for people who want to learn more about American history, just to do that without having to invest hours and hours, going to college or something like that, because believe me, the source is awesome and reliable. Well, let's talk about what's going on in our country today and some other things like that, Bill. You're holding in your hand a book, What Every American Needs to Know, about the Quran. The United States just is moving assets into the Gulf region over again, and people are speculating, are we going to strike Iran? And you had an American Minute that came out not too long ago, a few weeks ago, telling the story of Iran. It wasn't always called Iran, but after World War I, and what happened to the Persian Empire, if you will, and why we're in the mess we're in. You want to kind of cover that real quick for people?
Yeah, well, the Qajar dynasty was in charge of Persia for nearly 200 years, and in 1925, after World War I, you get a secular leader in Iran named Reza Shah, and Shah means king, and he secularizes Iran and gets rid of the Islamic dress, and he dresses in business suits. He allows the women to get educated, allows them to go out of the house without their husband's permission, without having to be accompanied by a male relative, allows the women to wear fashions, and he has the country advance with prosperity. World War II starts, and Iran did not drive out the Germans fast enough, and so Britain and Russia, who were allies then, teamed up together to overthrow Reza Shah. And they usher in a guy named Mossadegh, and he ends up becoming socialist, leaning toward the Soviet Union, and as time went on, he decides to nationalize the oil industry in Iran.
Okay.
What does that mean? Well, back in 1908, Winston Churchill changed the British Navy from coal to oil, but there's no oil in England per se. So in 1908, they formed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, better known as BP. BP, British Petroleum, is the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. And so when Mossadegh in the 1950s takes control of all the BP assets, the largest oil refinery in the world, Britain is having an oil shortage.
Okay.
And so they appeal to Eisenhower for help, and Eisenhower has Allen Dulles is the head of the CIA. He sends over Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, and they overthrow Mossadegh. It's this tactic that the socialists invented, where you go into a country, divide them into groups, pit them against each other, and create a crisis, and then in the confusion you seize power. And so Kermit Roosevelt Jr. did this in Iran. We overthrew, and we put in Reza Shah's son.
Okay.
It's Shah Reza Pahlavi.
Okay.
And he loves America, and he's office for 37 years.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention that why is all this history relevant? Well, this is a book that, believe it or not, he wrote this in 2007. All of a sudden, it's become our top seller again.
Yeah.
I think people are realizing that 2026 is going to be the year where we have to decide, is this compatible with the Western world? And I think what people should know is that, we are very tolerant of religions. The founding fathers intended it to be Christian religions. Just they didn't want to put a shackle on which denomination. However, what you're seeing is some people that are coming in last kind of want to kick the first out. I guess what I'm saying is it's more than a religion. It is a political and military system. When you study the life of Muhammad, you see this evidently. So it does seem to be a big issue in 2026. This is going to be an important year to decide.
And not just here, right? Around the world, and especially in Europe now, as England and France are, especially England's kind of coming to the realization of, what have we done? We're losing our country in a hurry.
Yeah.
But so Iran, Eisenhower gets Dulles to go in there, and they end up flipping it back to the Shah, but it's Pahlavi this time.
The son. Shah Reza Pahlavi, and he loves America.
Okay.
And he has the Cadillac Seville built in Iran.
Yeah, wow.
And he's friends.
1970s, right?
He's friends with Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Henry Ford, Gerald Ford. And he's pushing secularism. He's pushing allowing ladies to have fashions, and then you get Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter pulls the rug out from underneath of the Shah, and in 1979 ushers in the Ayatollah. So the socialists were doing the same thing in reverse. They were breaking the country into groups. They were pitting them against each other, and they were saying that the Shah is pro-Western, and evidently Carter was convinced that they were going to overthrow the Shah, and rather than us come to the Shah's defense, Jimmy Carter said, well, let's let Iran be taken over by this fundamentalist Ayatollah, and he's not going to be pro-Soviet. Well, Jimmy Carter was so naive.
Yeah.
The Ayatollah's in France, and Carter's like corresponding with him. And the Ayatollah's like, oh, you don't have to worry. America, we'll be nice to America. No sooner did Jimmy Carter order the military to stand down, Khomeini takes over Iran. He kills all the pro-American generals on the top of a high school rooftop. He hunts down all the pro-American people, and within months he's calling America the Great Satan, chanting death to America, and exporting anti-American imperialism is what he called it, all throughout the Middle East. And his goal is a one-world Islamic state called the Caliphate.
Wow.
And he's a Shia Muslim, which belongs to this sect called the Twelvers. They think the 12th Imam has been hiding in a cave for 600 years. And if the Ayatollah can create a global war, if he can cause chaos globally, like with nuclear weapons, then the 12th Imam will come out of the cave and usher in this caliphate, this one world government that's Islamic, and kill the little Satan Israel, the big Satan America, and so
he's a false messiah, right?
In Christian theology, it's the Antichrist.
Yeah.
But they're looking they're looking for their Christ, so to speak, but it's our Antichrist.
Yeah.
And anyway, but we have Jimmy Carter to thank for that.
Yeah, amazing.
And so Iran immediately starts Hezbollah, Hamas, helps with Hamas and the Houthis, and now Hezbollah has chapters in Venezuela that are infiltrating drug gangs that are coming across the border into America. And under Obama and Biden, there's thousands and thousands of these radical fundamentalist Muslims that are embedded and hidden all across America, just waiting for the signal to do their violence.
Wow.
So it's a very serious thing. Anyway, Deuteronomy 28 says, if a nation does not hearken to the Lord, one of the judgments is the stranger will come in amongst you and rise up above you, and they'll be the head and you'll be the tail. And so you have these Muslims coming in like Somalia, and 80% of them are on welfare, and they're doing the fraud. And they think that we are supposed to pay money to our conquerors, right? So when they conquer a country, they have to pay tribute. So they view our taxes as tribute to the conquerors, and they think they're the conquerors coming into America.
Wow, that's amazing. So getting back to kind of what you were alluding to, Michael, and the question of Islam being more than just a religion. A few years ago, Europe, there was this so-called Arab Spring that Obama ushered in, followed by a massive wave of, we're told, sort of spontaneous immigration, right, from the Middle East. And all of a sudden, all these millions of Muslims are pouring into Europe, and Europe in their, I think Reagan would have called it bleeding heart liberals. They open up the borders and let these people in out of maybe compassion, maybe one world government philosophy, I don't know, but what are they dealing with now in Europe?
Well, the strength that the West shows is part of this equation. Now, some of the imagery that I want the audience to have in their mind is checkers versus chess. Now, I've shared this before, but in checkers, you can win by being reactive or even just thinking one move ahead. Chess, however, it's very common for your opponent to be 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 moves ahead. What we're seeing is this is all coming to a head, but it has been a long time coming. And the strength that the Western world shows is a part of this equation. There are fundamental Muslims, and they are the ones my father was describing. They want to bring about world peace. However, their definition of world peace is when everyone submits to Allah. It's not living with your neighbor and appreciating their belief systems. It's, hey, there's no one else to contend with. Now, when the West shows strength, then those who are maybe not so sold on the fundamental aspect, they say, you know what, maybe we can hide under the umbrella of the West, maybe they'll protect us. But when we show compassion, they see it as weakness. It's a different culture, but really the biggest thing to know is that it's not just a religion, it is a religious and political as well as military system. I thought this was an interesting quote to bring up. Now, I believe in God, we believe in God, but just to show you how cut and dry this issue is, this is a quote from an interview. This is famous atheist, famous atheist Charles Dawkins saying, it seems to be a fundamentally, talking about Christianity, it seems to be a fundamentally decent religion in a way that I think Islam is not. When questioned about that statement, he said the way women are treated in Christianity is much better than the problems with female vicars and he says there's active hostility to women, which is promoted, I think, by the Holy Book of Islam. Mm-hmm. He's not just talking about the people, he's talking about doctrine.
Yeah.
So,
in the book, I go through Muhammad and pre-Muhammad.
Pre-Muhammad.
So before Muhammad in Arabia, you had different religions. One was Manichaeism. A guy named Mani thought there was little bits of truth in all the different religions that could be sort of extracted.
Okay.
And then there's Zoroastrianism that believed that paradise was filled full of virgins that would fulfill all the guy's desires. And Muhammad heard that and incorporated that into his belief system. Okay. And the Zoroastrians believed in jinns or genies like Aladdin's lamp. And then there's the Jewish faith, and Muhammad originally had his followers bowing toward Jerusalem, but when the Jews rejected him, 17 months later he changed it to Mecca. And then there's the pagan faith. In Arabia, they had 360 different pagan gods. The most popular was Hubal, the moon god, and their calendar began with the first sight of the crescent moon over the desert. And they had a rock they thought had fallen from the moon. It's a glass impact rock where a meteor hit the hot desert sand, melted it in this. And these pagans kissed it for centuries pre-Muhammad. Muhammad kissed that rock, it got incorporated into his belief system.
Yeah, and that's in the middle of Mecca, right, where they make their pilgrimage now?
Yeah. And then there's the Christian faith. And even Encyclopedia Britannica says the gospel was made known to Muhammad through apocryphal and heretical sources. So Muhammad thought the Trinity was the Father, Mary, and Jesus.
Oh, gosh, okay.
And apocryphal, what's that? The infancy gospel of Thomas. Written by someone who knew nothing of Jewish life. It's filled full of so many errors that nobody takes it serious. That's why it's not in our Bible. But the stories floated around the desert, little Harry Potter type things that Jesus made clay birds and clapped, they flew away, raised a playmate from the dead. there's no other place in ancient literature that these stories appear, other than this infancy gospel of Thomas that no one takes serious, but Muhammad heard it, incorporated it into Islam, now they take it as fact.
Okay.
And so he has all these different inputs. He goes to a cave. A movement was sweeping through Christianity at this time called monasticism, where if you really become a Christian, you should give away your money and live in a cave as a hermit. They called them desert fathers in Egypt. And so Muhammad's married to a 40-year-old wealthy widow. He's 25, he has free time, he goes to this cave, and a spirit appears to him and commands him to read. He said, I cannot read, and does it 3 times. And then the spirit squeezes him and he begins to recite. And the word Quran means recitation. It's an oral thing because Muhammad was illiterate.
Okay.
All of his followers were illiterate. And so you thought, how can somebody that's illiterate memorize these verses? Well, in Arabic, they had a rhyme to them like rap music. So maybe there's a student that can't read, but they memorize these long rap songs. And anyway, Muhammad goes to his wife Khadijah and tells her he thinks he's demon possessed. And she decides to test the spirit by having him sit on her right thighs. Can you see the visitant? He says, yes, over there. Has him sit on her left thigh. Can you see the visitant? Yes, over there. And then she begins to remove her veils and says, can you see the spirit? He goes, no. And she says, well, it must have been from God because it was embarrassed to look upon me without my veils on. That was the test.
Gosh.
Now, the 1 John 4 says the test is any spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus as Christ as of Antichrist. Anyway, Muhammad gets confrontational. He's chased out of Mecca. Jews let him into Medina. And he goes into the minority neighborhoods, organizes a following, gets involved in politics. And then he allows his followers to rob the caravans headed back to Mecca. He becomes a military leader. He fights in 66 battles, killing 3,000 people. And within 5 years of Muhammad coming as an immigrant into Medina, there's not a Jew left in Medina. So this idea is you can spread Islam 2 ways. One is with the sword, and the other is what's called dawah, D-A-W-A. It's civilizational jihad, where you come in as an immigrant, go into the minority neighborhoods and get involved politically, and then you have random outbreaks of violence, and the previous inhabitants of the neighborhood no longer feel safe and move out, and you take over the neighborhood.
Wow, so this has been going on a little while.
For 1,400 years.
And people don't realize it, but the Islamic Empire invaded Europe many times over the last 2,000 years, right?
Yeah. People forget Egypt used to be Christian for 6 centuries, evangelized by Mark that wrote the Gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, until Amir ibn al-As conquered. All of North Africa used to be Christian. There were 250 Catholic dioceses. Syria was completely Christian for 6 centuries. Evangelized by Paul, the name Christian first came from Syria. And then they conquer Spain in the year 711, and they're finally stopped outside of Paris at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, exactly 100 years after the death of Muhammad in 632 AD.
Gosh.
It's a 100-year military campaign. So just like we look to the first century Christians as the ideal, they look to the first century of Islam. It's a military campaign.
And so we're pretty much out of time, but let me ask you about this. Pending in front of the U.S. Senate right now, something called the SAVE Act, and this is they're seeking to require ID for people to vote. Right, pretty common sense thing. What are your thoughts, Bill, about and Michael, about the whole subject of election integrity? Do we need this law and more to secure our elections?
Thank you. I wanted to correct myself. Richard Dawkins was where that quote was from. Accuracy is important to us.
Yeah, Richard, not Charles. Yeah.
So if we can't secure the elections, it's over. And the left does voter fraud. I was reading where in China they can go across to Guam for a 4-month tourist visa and have babies and get an American birth certificate because it's an American territory. And they can go back to China and grow up and never even live in America, but they can vote in American elections. I was reading where California has it where you can register to vote online and you just check the little box for citizen. But there's no background check, nobody's verifying it. So all these Pakistanis are going onto the California website and registering to vote, and their name gets into the system. And nobody ever verifies it, and they can vote. And so it's, unless we can guarantee that Americans vote in American elections, it's just going to be a flood of voter fraud. And if we don't win the midterms and they get a majority in Congress, they'll start impeachments of President Trump, and they'll begin investigations of everybody. They'll kneecap the entire conservative agenda, and if they ever get back in, we have to remember they were criminalizing. Biden declared Easter Transgendered Visibility Day. This is the most important Christian holiday celebration, and they wanted to make it, and then they were arresting moms for speaking out at school board meetings because they don't want their kids to be transgendered, and they're sneaking into Catholic churches, and FBI is. This is what we're facing, and they're doing it in other countries right now. I was talking to Calvin Robinson. He's an Anglican priest. He's moved from London to Grand Rapids, and he was telling me 16,000 people are in prison in England today, some for as little as liking a post. Right? They're arresting people. So this is critical. This is what they want to do in America. We need to repent, and each of us turn back to the Lord, but we need to. Proverbs says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. We need to see, we thank God for a personal relationship with the Lord, but if personal relationships are so important, don't we want our children to have a chance to have a personal relationship with the Lord? Because if we don't get involved, they're going to indoctrinate them with anti-Christian stuff and then Islamicize them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an example, this is at the state level, but in Colorado, just yesterday or today, the Democrats who control the legislature are voting on a series of bills to decouple Colorado's income tax system from the federal system, and that means typically it's like if something's deductible under the federal, it's deductible under the state, and they work together like that. But they're separating because they want to undo all of Trump's tax cuts, all of the recent progress made in that regard. So imagine if they take over the House, imagine if they take over the Senate. This is super important. Well, we could sit and talk all day with Bill Federer and Michael. Such a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, tell people how to reach you.
Thank you so much. AmericanMinute.com for everything Team American Minute. And those American Minutes that you had mentioned, Richard, Bill sends those out himself. He clicks send. It's not automated. That's a great way to stay connected with us. I do joke that it's become the American 5 to 10 minute. It's a good chunk of very interesting, compelling history about the day.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you've got a lot more than just 3 books. You've got, 30 or more than 30 now? So a real treasure right here, folks. You want to make sure you check out AmericanMinute.com. Thank you, Bill. Love you, brother.
Thank you, Richard.
Michael, God bless you. Appreciate you so much.